bum 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 bum. Hey everybody, come on in. It's good to see you. Is it my imagination, or do you look smarter and sexier than even yesterday? I swear every one of you is looking brighter and you're just glowing today. What is it about you? Did you change your diet? Well, good job, whatever you're doing. Well, I know why you're here. You're here to have a simultaneous sip. You found the right place. This is Coffee with Scott Adams, and you are about to enjoy the unparalleled pleasure. Yeah, all you need is a cup or a mug or a glass of stein, a chalice, tankard, thermos, flask, canteen, grail, goblet, vessel of any kind. Fill it with your favorite liquid. I'm partial to coffee. And if you'd like to have the dopamine hit of the day, the thing that makes everything better, you'll join me right now. Are you ready? You ready? You ready? Go. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Good stuff. Are y'all going to watch or y'all? When did I become Southern? Hey, y'all. Are y'all going to watch the debates tonight? Good stuff. Will the Democrats go easy on Joe Biden, or do they think Joe Biden will simply take care of himself? Well, I've got a joke. Man goes into the doctor and he says, "Doctor, I have been in a terrible industrial accident, and my male unit is hanging from a thread. Can you save it?" And the doctor looks and goes, "No, we're going to have to remove it." And the man says, "No, I need a second opinion." He runs to another doctor and says, Doctor, my manhood is hanging by just a thread. Do you think we can save it?" And the doctor says, "No, I don't think we can." He goes to the next doctor, and he says, Doctor, are you going to have to amputate?" And the doctor says, "No, we will not." And the man says, "Finally, thank you." And the doctor says, "You don't have to amputate that. That's going to fall off on its own." And that is the story of Joe Biden. It may be that the other Democratic candidates do not have to attack him at all. Not at all. They may just have to wait for it to fall off on its own so that they can be good people and still get rid of Joe Biden. Speaking of Joe Biden, Hunter Biden gave his first interview since all the stuff went down about Ukraine. And he said that he did absolutely nothing wrong by taking that role on the board of Burisma, but he admitted that it was a swampy situation. I did nothing wrong, but I was involved in a swampy situation. That's very close to doing something wrong. What was it that made it swampy and yet not wrong? Was it legally wrong? Well, apparently not. It wasn't illegal. I was listening to a CNN pundit say that what Hunter Biden did was not illegal and not unethical. What? Even Hunter Biden said it was swampy. Where is the dividing line between swampy and unethical? Is there a line? Doesn't swampy kind of mean unethical? Sorta. Is there a difference between swampy and unethical? If Hunter Biden goes on TV and he himself labels the situation swampy, how does a pundit who's watching it say it's not unethical? That's a stretch. All right. Yeah, speaking of Project Veritas, so we got to see James O'Keefe's latest offering, Undercover Camera, from a CNN, I think he was a contract worker or something, but he had a lot to say. And there were a few other people who were undercover camera subjects. I think what we found out is that the boss, Jeffrey Zucker, only wants to push impeachment as a story, and nothing else seems to matter over there. He's got that one concern, and he's just going to go after impeachment. So I don't think there's any question anymore about CNN's bias, but I don't know that that was necessarily new. However, sometimes when you put faces and names and stories to things, you take something that was a concept people knew and you activate it. So it becomes active in people's minds as opposed to just a concept that floats through that they could talk to it if they had to write an essay report, but it doesn't have much persuasive power on them. As soon as you put faces on it, you're in good hands. All right. Um, you're in good hands, meaning if you put faces on something, it's more persuasive. So the outrage continues over the Kingsman video showing the president slaying various members of the media with their, well, you've all seen the video by now. So the original movie, The Kingsman, got a whole lot of attention. And apparently they have a third Kingsman movie in the works. What a great time to be working on a third one of those. But then we found out that the entire meme that everybody was concerned about was running on a little television set in the corner of a room that not many people went to. It was just in a room by itself, a little TV that probably nobody stood in there and watched. So approximately 0 people saw the meme, except whoever complained, apparently. But then it got literally tens of millions of views once people complained. So what do we make of that? Outrage theater. Rah, rah, it's the worst thing in the world. Scene. All right. Is it my imagination, or is Trump being proven right about Syria? It feels like on day one, it looked kind of questionable. Day one looked like, oh my God, we're abandoning our allies. And that was sort of all we knew, right? That was the whole story. Day one, abandoning our allies. Day 2, day 3, we get more information, more detail. And turns out this might surprise you. You didn't see this coming. So I might be the first person who's ever told you this, but it turns out, and don't spread this around, it turns out that the Middle East is a complicated place. I know. It's the first time you've heard that, but it's complicated over there. Turns out, did you know this? There's more than one variable. One variable is whatever commitment we have, morally or otherwise, to the Kurds. That's a variable. I didn't know this, but it turns out there are other variables. There's this group called ISIS. Have you heard of them? There's Syria, there's Russia, there's Assad, there's Iran, there's Turkey. Turns out there's a lot of variables in play there. And I was just reading an analysis by an ex-CIA operations person, and let me be specific, former CIA ops officer, Bryan Dean Wright. Wright spelled W-R-I-G-H-T. Bryan Dean Wright, Bryan with a Y. And he sort of walks us through what's happening over there. And he puts it in the framework of, let's say, a plan or a strategy, although I don't like to use those words. And what he points out is that by leaving, it forces the players to find some kind of balance. As long as we stayed, things could stay permanently out of balance because we were an artificial power in the region. But as soon as we left, suddenly everybody got flexible. Did you notice that? By everybody, I mean the Kurds. What was it about the Kurds that allowed them to make this deal with Russia and Syria a few days after Turkey attacked, but they were unwilling to deal with Syria and Russia, at least productively, before the attack? Was there any point at which the Kurds said, whoa, Turkey, can you give us a few days to see if we could work something out where you're happy, we're happy, everybody gets what they want? Do you remember the Kurds ever doing that? I don't. And now I don't know that they didn't try that, but as a consumer of the news and somebody who's trying to form an opinion, I'm looking at it and I'm saying to myself, there's a step missing. There should have been a step where the Kurds said, hey, United Nations, hey, Turkey, hey, everybody, can you just hold your fire for a couple days? Let's talk. There's probably some way you can get what you want while we can get something like what we want. I don't see why we have to be at war. Did that ever happen? Did that ever happen? Now, there might be a perfectly good reason why that never happened. It could be that the Kurds know darn well that the Turks were not going to talk to them in any productive way. But it's still conspicuously missing. It just seems like you should have done that anyway, even if your odds were very small, that it would make a difference. So there's something that the Kurds need to explain. And one of the things that the Kurds need to explain is, why is it that we're the ones responsible for their decisions? Because they make decisions too, and their decisions affect us. And if what they decided to do was fight when there was still some possibility to talk, that's sort of their decision. That's not our decision. But again, we're ignorant consumers of the news. Maybe they tried. We just don't know about it. If they did try and we don't know about it, that's a big part of the story, isn't it? You know, that could modify what you think about the whole thing. Changes how you think of the Kurds. But here's what we've learned in the following days. So the public has been educated that there is such a thing as good Kurds and bad Kurds, if I can simplify. Bad Kurds being people that even the United States has labeled terrorists. Turkey has labeled them terrorists, and Turkey should not be expected to put up with terrorists on their border. Who can ask Turkey to put up with terrorists on their border when the United States went halfway around the world to kill some terrorists just so they didn't come to their border again? So I don't know how you can blame Turkey for wanting to get rid of people that even we consider terrorists on their border. There's clearly that was a real military risk. So you got that going on, and I think that people are starting to understand that Turkey is not attacking another country for fun. You know, they're not doing it for entertainment. They're not doing it for conquest. There doesn't seem to be any ambition on Turkey's side for conquering territory for the purpose of, you know, having a greater Turkey or anything like that. So I think people are getting into the details a little bit, and they're seeing the following, that Bryan Dean Wright lays out pretty well in his tweet. And he talks about how our absence will cause a quagmire for Russia and Syria and Iran, and they also have a reason to fight ISIS. So we don't need to be there because the people who are already there have enough power and resources, and they're all on the same side in terms of fighting ISIS. So I think what's going to happen is that the president will take lots of heat. There will be Kurds getting killed and civilians getting killed that we very much wish had not happened. That's sort of where we are now. But it does look like he shook the box in a way that will get you closer to something like a stable, permanent situation without America than if he had not done this. Now, you could ask, well, could he have done it in a more gradual way? Yeah, and it wouldn't have worked, probably. I think that he probably reached a point. I'm talking about the president. Remember, he's wanted to do this for however many years. It wasn't an impulsive decision. He's been pushing against this door for three years. If he thought he could get the door to budge with some other method after 3.5 years of pushing, I think he would have used the other method. I have to think that the president simply ran out of options, and he just said to himself, well, here's the deal. No matter what we do, people are going to die. I have a little bit of control over who it is. I don't have control over whether or not people die. He doesn't have that kind of power. That's the kind of region where people are going to die. So you can get the Americans out of the way, and you can use it as an excuse to do whatever else you need to do over there, rearrange troops, etc. But he just needed to shake the box, and he shook the heck out of it. And I feel as though history is going to be very kind to him for this. There may still be a forever complaint about maybe the exact way that he did it. But I don't know that there will be a historical judgment against the president for pulling out. It does look like this is going to end up being the right decision. Now, when I say pulling out, apparently we're going to leave 1,000 troops there to help mop up any ISIS that starts to rear its head. Here's the other thing that's different. Drones. Because we have such a drone presence, you don't really need people on the ground so much, as long as everybody who's on the ground also hates ISIS. So if you see some ISIS, call a Russian, call a Syrian, call a Kurd, call a Turk, call anybody. Call anybody except ISIS and they'll take care of it, right? They all have the same interest. So I feel as though the president is on the path to not just a win, but maybe a win for the ages. Like the kind that historians talk about forever. And they say, man, he took a lot of heat for that, but we really had to get out of there. And nobody else could figure out a way to do it because there was no clean way to do it. So he did it the dirty way. He did it with people dying. He made an adult decision. People died. He knew it, but we had to get out of there. I don't know. I think history's going to be okay with this. Let's talk about the China trade deal. What China trade deal? So I've been telling you that there's no chance of a China trade deal. And the reason that there's no chance, this is just my own opinion, is that they have no interest in a fair deal, and we have no interest in an unfair deal. And that's the only thing both of us are offering. We're offering something that's fair. They're only offering something that isn't. How do you make a deal with that? There's no room for a deal. So decoupling, I think, is a guarantee, but I think it'll be a soft decoupling where we just do less business in the future as opposed to immediately pulling everything out of China. I don't think that's going to happen. So, and even the question of whether the Chinese had agreed to buy a bunch of our agricultural products, that's not so clear, is it? I just saw an article that says, China says, oh yeah, we already bought, talking about things they've already done, we've already bought a whole bunch of your agricultural products in line with our domestic demand. To which I say, what? You bought a bunch of agricultural products in line with your domestic demand? Well, that sounds like you didn't do anything. This sounds like business as usual. Don't they wake up every day and buy agricultural products in line with their domestic demand? So China has agreed, as of yesterday, they have confirmed what the president said, that the Chinese and the Americans are on the same page. Whatever that means. Does that mean that they're on the same page as in they're going to make a deal? Because I don't see it happening. Here's the thing to watch for. If you hear that China has locked up their major fentanyl dealer, whose name they know where he lives, they know what he does. We know it. 60 Minutes interviewed the guy. China knows who's sending us the fentanyl that's killing tens of thousands of people in this country every year. If you hear that they've arrested that guy or that he's disappeared or something, then you could imagine that we're close to a trade deal. As long as that guy's alive and free and sending us fentanyl, there isn't any chance of a trade deal. Let me say that as clearly as possible. As long as you hear that one guy is still a free man and still sending us fentanyl, you are not even close to a trade deal. Because that happens first, all right? China needs to shut that down like nothing's ever been shut down. Then you can get serious about the other stuff. But that's not really a subject of negotiation. That's more like a ticket to a negotiation. If you're dealing with somebody who's killing your people as you're negotiating, the killing's not part of the negotiating. The killing's what you have to do to get a ticket to the negotiating, all right? So China has not bought yet a ticket to the game. If you're talking about who's winning the game or what the final score is, you're way ahead of yourself. China has not purchased a ticket to attend the game. Speaking of China and the game, let's talk about the dumbest guy in the NBA, LeBron James. Now, there are probably other dumb people in the NBA, but maybe they're less visible. So I'm just going to come right out and say it. LeBron James might be the dumbest guy in the NBA because of his response to the whole tweet about China and Hong Kong, etc. So the general manager of some other team said some pro-Hong Kong stuff. Everybody went crazy. And then LeBron James comes out with this. So Daryl Morey was the guy who started it all with his tweet in support of Hong Kong. And here's what LeBron says, quote, "I don't want to get into a word or sentence feud with Daryl Morey." Yeah, you don't want to get into a word or sentence feud. Those are the worst kind. But I believe he wasn't educated on the situation at hand, and he spoke. He wasn't educated on the situation at hand? What exact situation at hand are you talking about? It's a little unclear. So many people could have been harmed. This is LeBron still. Not just financially, but physically. What? Emotionally, spiritually. What? Who was being spiritually harmed by this? Who was being physically harmed by a tweet about Hong Kong? I don't know what LeBron is talking about. So just be careful what we tweet and what we say and what we do. Even though, yes, we do have freedom of speech, but there can be a lot of negative that comes with that too. Then later, when he got some pushback, because if you read between the lines, you would imagine that he was talking about the situation with China and Hong Kong, and he clarified that he was only talking about tweeting or not tweeting. So he wasn't talking about the content of the tweet. He was talking about the free speech and whether the talking about the topic was bad or not. But did it sound like that's what he was doing? So his clarification is he's only talking about tweeting can get you in trouble, so you should think about what you tweet. That's not what he exactly said, though. He says, but I believe he, meaning the original tweeter, Daryl Morey, wasn't educated on the situation at hand. What exactly is the situation at hand that LeBron thinks Daryl Morey was not educated on? Twitter? What is LeBron saying now with his clarification that Daryl Morey doesn't know how Twitter works? Or he doesn't know that if he says things in public, people will hear him? What exactly is it that LeBron thinks that Daryl Morey needed to go to school for to get educated? Hey, Daryl, I'm going to send you to school. It's called Twitter School. Did you know, Daryl, that when you tweet, other people can see it? And Daryl will be like, whoa, you're blowing my mind. I didn't know that tweeting is something other people see. Because you see, as LeBron has educated us, Daryl Morey had not been educated about the situation at hand, which LeBron has defined later as tweeting in public. So let's educate Daryl Morey with some things that he should know about Twitter. Daryl, Twitter's in public. Did you know that? Because LeBron thinks that you are not educated on how tweeting works. LeBron thinks you don't know that when you tweet, other people see it. Did you know that? Maybe you should go to school, Daryl Morey, if you think that tweeting is just something that you see. Because LeBron is educating you right now. He's telling you, other people see it. And this may be surprising too. This is something Daryl Morey needs to go get educated about. Did you know, Daryl, and this may shock you, people have different opinions on stuff? Did you know that? And that if you tweet, number one, it's public. You didn't know that. And number two, there might be people with different opinions. Shocking? I know. This is the sort of thing you don't learn unless you go to Twitter college and you get educated on how Twitter works. Did you know that when people disagree with you and you say something in public, there could be this thing called pushback, a thing called criticism? Were you aware of that? Because according to LeBron, Daryl Morey was not aware that Twitter is public, that when you say your opinion, people might disagree with it, and that when they disagree with it, they might push back, and that there might be some implications to your life beyond social media if a lot of people hate you. These are a lot of things that LeBron is educating Daryl Morey on, because Daryl Morey could not know these things on his own. Because apparently LeBron thinks that Daryl Morey has the IQ of, I don't know, crustacean. Is there anybody who doesn't know that Twitter is a public vehicle and that if you say an opinion that's unpopular, it could have some blowback? I don't know that Daryl Morey needed any education, LeBron. All right, but I think LeBron failed as hard as you can fail in a public statement. That's just about as hard as you can fail. I would say this is Hunter Biden quality right here. So LeBron James is sort of the Hunter Biden of the NBA, a guy who maybe you just shouldn't talk. So if that helps you, LeBron James is the Hunter Biden of the NBA, somebody who can talk, but perhaps he should take his own advice and not do so much. So here's the irony. LeBron James telling somebody else that they don't understand the ramifications of making statements in public, and then LeBron James makes a statement in public that he did not understand the ramifications of. Is this fun or what? LeBron James commits the crime in public in front of the entire world that he's complaining about. So while he's complaining about it, he's committing it. It's sort of like robbing a bank while complaining about somebody robbing banks. It would be like swearing while you're complaining about somebody using curse words. LeBron, if you were really worried about saying the wrong thing in public and that it can hurt people, maybe you shouldn't talk in public because you're hurting a lot of people. I mean, LeBron, your opinion about President Trump, do you think that had any impact on the NBA? Yeah, it did. LeBron, maybe you should take your own advice. All right, so enough about that. Did you see NBC's defense against the Ronin Farrow allegations in the new book? So Ronin's got a new book in which he says effectively that NBC squashed his story about Harvey Weinstein, which he then took to someplace else and it got published. And so Ronin is alleging that NBC was probably trying to protect Weinstein by slow walking the story and keeping it under wraps, and then actually told Ronin to stop working at it at one point. And the thought is that Weinstein maybe had some dirt on NBC because NBC had its own Matt Lauer problem, and apparently they've paid off a number of people. There have been settlements, etc. But here's what I wanted to say about that. NBC put up a pretty good defense. Now, I'm not going to pick a side here. I'm just going to tell you that I'm always impressed when somebody can put up a good defense. Even if they're really guilty, a good defense is still worth noting, because I like to talk about what is persuasive and what is not. Here was NBC's defense. They said, we have a standard that if you can't, I'm roughly going to describe the standard. I might get the details wrong. But it's something like if you can't get somebody on camera to back up your allegations, you don't have a story for NBC, right? And at the time, apparently Ronin could not find somebody to put on camera with a name and a face to make the allegations, and they'd asked him to go get that person. They'd asked him to go get Rose McGowan or somebody to be on camera, because that's their standard. Now, that's a pretty good defense, isn't it? Because I think factually, they can back up the fact that that is their standard. And I think factually they can back up the fact that he had not met it at the time that they told him to stop working on it. Now, have you ever had a boss who told you to stop working on something that you thought you should still work on? Yeah, most of you, probably. The most ordinary thing in the world is that your boss tells you to stop working on something, you still have a passion for it, and you think your boss is wrong. It's like the most common thing in the world. Now, NBC also defends, saying that they did numerous extensive reporting on lots of other people who had sexual Me Too allegations, and they list them. And it's a pretty long list. They go right down the list. We did this story, this story, this story, this story, this story. So clearly we've never backed away from a story about a Me Too sexual allegation, because look at all these examples. We do them all the time. You had one story where nobody would go on camera, and that was our standard. Pretty good defense, isn't it? Now, Ronin Farrow's allegations are also pretty darn good. So I'm not saying that their defense trumps his allegations. I'm saying it's a really good defense. You know, if it's almost certainly incomplete, meaning that Ronin would certainly respond with, yeah, but what about? And there may be some gaps in their story. So I'm not saying their story is true. I will say it's a little bit credible. It's a little bit credible. Credible meaning that you can't really determine if it's true or false, but it's in the category of things that don't smell wrong. So NBC's defense doesn't smell as bad as you think it is, which doesn't mean they're innocent. I still am fully open to that Ronin's interpretation of why they did things is accurate. I think it's he does his homework, he does his research, he's credible, he doesn't, so I think he's credible. But so is the defense. It's an interesting story. So my guess is that the truth is maybe somewhere in between. Who knows? Maybe we'll find out someday. So Congressman Matt Gaetz, he crashed the impeachment inquiry hearings. So, the Republicans are not invited. It's a little closed-door Democrat thing, and in which they're interviewing witnesses to see if there's enough to take forward an impeachment process. And, of course, all the Republicans are complaining about it because it's behind closed doors, but Matt Gaetz decides to just show up and sit down and see if they'll kick him out. Now, of course, eventually he got to say his thing. He got on camera. He got a lot of attention for it. It's a national story. It's on the headlines. But of course, he was asked to leave, and he did. Now, here's my question about that. Why is he the first one who thought of that? Does this sound familiar? Do you remember when Rand Paul tried to crash a budget meeting? And he had the cameras follow him around, and he had a big pile of budget documents, and he was going door to door. It was pretty good. It got attention, put him in the spotlight. Do you remember when AOC? I forget the exact situation, but AOC went to crash. Maybe it was Mitch McConnell's office, and I think maybe Mitch McConnell wasn't even in the office that day. But the cameras followed AOC, and she sort of went without an appointment to try to crash, I think it was Mitch McConnell's office. And of course, nothing happened from it, but she got a lot of attention. She got attention personally, she got attention for her issue. It was good. So here's this free money sitting on the table with this, the Matt Gaetz situation. So we know the play. The play is that you go crash the meeting because the cameras will follow you. You get to have your say, and you bring attention to the fact that you should have been there in the first place. It's a strong play. So this cash, this idea of doing this, I'll call it analogously cash, is just sitting on the table there. And one by one, every politician is walking past the table with free cash. It's just sitting there. It's available for anybody. Matt Gaetz walks by and says, I see a table full of free cash. Is it anybody? Does this belong to anybody? Seriously, this is just free cash. Nobody is claiming this money. It's just cash, just sitting on the table. Okay, picks it up, puts it in his pocket. Who's the smartest person in Congress? Not the people who walk past the cash. It's the person who picked it up. So I say this about the president all the time as well, that he seems to be able to see free cash sitting on the table. And so he picks it up. Not in terms of money all the time, but in terms of policies and what he's doing. He'll take the free cash every time. And so here's Matt Gaetz taking the free cash, which is a really good sign for his future. If you can't take the free cash, you're not even trying. All right, let's give a update on the Hypnosis Coup. So the Hypnosis Coup is, instead of the old days where you fought where you had a coup that was military, where you had bullets and guns and stabby things and explosions to take over a government, it appears that the intelligence services working with the news organizations on the left have created a hypnosis coup. In other words, they're creating a persuasion reality in people's minds such that they will be able to use legal means, let's say impeachment, or even the election, to take over the government. Now, we've always had a situation where when people ran for office, they were trying to persuade. So you could always say that every election is sort of a persuasion battle. But what's different is that the persuasion is happening between elections now. Now, it's bleeding into the election season, but it happened on day one of the president getting in office. So now the intelligence groups clearly are using high-end hypnosis techniques. They are literally brainwashing the public to be okay with them doing what they need to do within the legal framework so that nobody goes to jail and they can actually have a coup and replace the president with hypnosis. What is the only defense that the sitting president would have against the most highly trained group of mental manipulators, the actual people who are trained brainwashers? Between the news media and the intelligence groups that are anti-Trump, they are literally trained persuaders. They know how to hypnotize through repetition, through framing, through what kinds of pictures and images they show. And so the country is now being, we're in the middle of the strongest, well, probably maybe the biggest hypnosis battle of all time. So we're in a war right now in which one side is using the best, most powerful mechanisms of brainwashing to get away with a coup. I used to say essentially a coup, but it's not essentially a coup. It's a coup. They're just using different weapons. The weapons they're using is persuasion and fake news and all that. Now, what's the defense? Somebody asked me yesterday when I said that, well, what do you do about it? Well, isn't it the weirdest situation that they're using these techniques against the most powerful persuader we've ever seen? There's nobody else who could have made a dent against this attack. There's no other president who could have survived this long with the entire intelligence and the news media majority so solidly against him. Nobody else could have gotten this far. You saw that the president has a unique talent. They accused him and his side of fake news. He owned it, turned that into an attack against the other side. Who can do that? Who can do that, really? Have you ever seen that done before? He's done it several times. He does it right in front of you. He does it by being the louder, more clever, more interesting voice, using repetition. I mean, he has a lot of techniques that are pretty standard techniques, but he's the best. He's the best we've ever seen in persuading against such an offensive charge. Now, there's another interesting thing that's happening. The president, by strange coincidence, has on his side, you might say, a variety of, let's say, generals or lower level supporters who are also unusually well trained in persuasion. Wouldn't you agree? Would you not agree that the president has supporters who are unusually good at persuasion. Take Mike Cernovich, for example, Jack Posobiec, for example. Take me, for example. Those are just some names. Take Candace Owens, for example. Take Charlie Kirk, for example. I could probably go on, right? But the president has a sort of a motley crew of people who are unusually skilled at this, carpe diem, who, by the way, I think has been allowed back on Twitter. Didn't he get suspended yesterday? I didn't know the details of that, but I think he's back. So you have the entire persuasion, brainwashing mechanism of these intelligence agencies, the Brennans, the Clappers, and the Democrats, the entire Democratic Party, plus the media, all of that persuasion against Trump and this ragtag group of people who have sort of learned persuasion, however. Now, of course, I and some of the people that I mentioned have, in effect, trained a number of other people. Because if you're watching my content, if you're watching Mike Cernovich, for example, you're seeing the mechanism, you're seeing the method described to you, so you can see it from other people. Rush Limbaugh is another good example. Rush Limbaugh, very persuasive. Sean Hannity, very persuasive. Tucker Carlson, very persuasive. Greg Gutfeld, very persuasive. These are very persuasive people. So, yeah. I could go on, but you know all the names. So it's a very interesting war, and we're right in the middle of it. Yeah, Mark Levin, very Dan Bongino. Yeah, I'm seeing other names people are saying here in the comments, and they're all correct. There is a weird coincidence that the Trump team has a smallish group of unusually talented persuaders. And I think that's the only reason he's holding on so far. Because one of the things that this president does better than any president's ever done, and I think you would agree with this. So here's a statement that I think you'll agree with. President Trump does a better job than any president ever has of staying connected to the immediate, right now, feelings and opinions of his followers, his supporters. I think he's pretty well tied in. Now, part of it is because he watches TV news, so he's watching the same thing that is brainwashing the masses, and so he's tuned into it all the time. And I've said before that he's seeing what other people are doing, and when something works, it gets a lot of attention on social media, for example, he often will adopt it. So you're seeing the president in this interactive, continuous dance with his supporters of people like me and other people will try an approach. We'll explain something a certain way, we'll frame it a certain way. And when the White House likes it, they notice. And it becomes one of the things, it's obvious that it becomes one of the things that they talk about. Hey, we see this social media influencer or this Fox News host or anybody else, Breitbart, for example. We saw somebody make a good argument or they did something persuasive. Let's amplify that. So I think any other president with any other mechanism for staying connected to the base, I don't think they would have survived this long. I think there's something completely unique about Trump and the way his base interacts with him that gives him sort of a superpower, that makes him able to withstand the hypnosis war. So that's what I'm going to call this. I'm going to call this the hypnosis civil war. Well, what's better, the hypnosis coup or the hypnosis civil war? Which of those describes what's happening better? I'll wait for your answers because they're a little bit backed up. All right. So I want to run this by you again so that you get this full sense of the hypnosis coup and how strong this is. And this is a thought experiment that I tried yesterday, but it's so powerful, I'm going to say it again in case anybody missed it. It goes like this. Um, Imagine somebody who had not been following any politics, and they'd never even heard of the Ukraine phone call. And it's a man on the street interview, person on the street interview, and you go up to him and put the microphone in this person's face, and you say, I want to get your opinion about this. President Trump made a phone call with the newly elected president of Ukraine, and he asked him for some help on a matter of great interest to the public, which is we need to know if foreign countries are going to have influence or have influenced our elections or our political process. There's a situation with Biden who's leading in the polls. His son is taking a lot of money from Ukraine, and Ukraine is one of the countries that Biden had as his portfolio. It's enough to ask questions. Can you look into this for us? And by the way, man on the street, it's the president's job. You can't expect the lower level people to really work on this project until the bosses have talked. So the bosses were talking. And it's something that we knew that the president was interested in because he said it publicly before. And by the way, we have a treaty with Ukraine for exactly this kind of judicial cooperation. So, person on the street who has never watched the news and never heard anybody else tell you what to think. What do you think of President Trump following up on the Biden situation? What would the person on the street say? Let's say they didn't already have an opinion about the president, that they were just going to retreat to their bias. They just weren't paying attention to any politics. What would they say if you described accurately everything that the president did with that phone call, left nothing out, you just describe it? Would that person say, my God, you're describing a traitor who sold out the United States for personal gain? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think you could only have that opinion if it's been assigned to you by the hypnotists in the deep state working with the media. If they had not assigned the opinion that that was traitorous behavior, I don't think anybody would get there on their own. I don't think the facts come anywhere close to making that case. In fact, every time I hear it, my head like shakes a little bit, and I'm like, what is anybody seeing in that phone call that isn't the president following one of the top priorities of the country completely legally and with witnesses? And then he released the transcript because he was so sure that nothing was wrong with it. I think that the person on the street who is not hypnotized by the media simply would not see anything wrong with it. I don't. It's a completely artificial hypnosis made problem. If you take the hypnosis out of it, there's nothing there. All right, let me throw out the weirdest idea of the day. Are you ready? You waited until the end, so you get the weird stuff. Weird stuff coming. Rick Perry is apparently going to be leaving the Department of Energy. My interpretation from the outside is he did a good job. There are a number of things that the Department of Energy funded and made priorities, especially in the nuclear energy field, that looked very productive. So I thought there were some good things happening there. Now, who replaces him? Are you ready? Bill Gates. Just think about it. Bill Gates, Secretary for the Department of Energy. Yeah? Your first impression is, whoa, that can't work, can it? Well, here's one problem. I don't think Bill Gates is a Republican, right? As far as I know, he's not a Republican. But you know what else Bill Gates is not? An idiot. He's also one of the smartest people who have ever been born. Like, actually, one of the smartest people who have ever been born. I was watching the special about him, and you forget this little fact, but I think when he was in 8th grade, he got the highest math score in some kind of standardized test of any high schooler in the state in 8th grade. So in 8th grade, He was already smarter than all the seniors in his state in math. And that's just math. I mean, who knows what else he knows. So if you put somebody who is completely dedicated to objective fact into a job, Department of Energy, which shouldn't have any political element to it, should it? Why would there ever be a political element to Department of Energy? If anything, if there were ever a department that should be just factually run, it's energy, right? You should be able to take all of the politics out of that and still get to a place where everybody's happy with it. Bill Gates could do that. Name the second person who could do that. That's right. Can't think of one. Name the second person who knows as much about the entire spectrum of green energy, carbon scrubbing, nuclear energy, and Generation 4, and is credible to everybody in the United States. Name the other one. You can't. You can't. There's nobody else. There's nobody as qualified as Bill Gates. Now, Bill Gates has other things to do. He's running the Gates Institute. He's building, toilets for Africa, which is a big, big deal because they need to separate their drinking water from their toilet facilities, which I won't get into the details, but let's just say it's a big problem. And he's working on a lot of stuff. So I don't think he'd have the bandwidth to be for 4 years of being the head of the Department of Energy. But how about for a year? How about for 1 year? I'll bet 1 year of part-time Bill Gates in the Department of Energy would fix the whole damn world. Fix the whole world. I think that would happen because the main thing that has to happen is to get your thinking right, get your priorities right, and probably get rid of some obstacles. There's nobody who can see the whole field the way he can see the field because, one, he's so smart, and two, he's looked into it. You put Bill Gates there as the head of the Department of Energy for 1 year, part-time, because he's got his other stuff to do, I believe he could sort it out. And probably what would happen is we would end up with a more robust and practical plan for iterating our nuclear technology to the point where we have a dominant American industry for nuclear. And if anybody in another country wants to build a nuclear plant, who do they go to? Well, you want them to come to the United States and say, the plants that you're building in the United States are the safest, cheapest, best supported designs. Can we work with you, United States, to help us build one in our smaller country? That's where you need to be. Because every time some other country builds with your technology, you've got a little bit of sway with them, right? You've got a little influence, and it's a good kind. It's kind both would be happy with, I would think. So, Bill Gates, 1 year, Department of Energy, sort it out, and then find a permanent person to fill it. Do I think that it's likely that Bill Gates would be eager to take the job? No. I don't think it's likely. But let me ask you this. You're Bill Gates. You seriously want to fix the world. I mean, he's working on it every day. There's no question about it. He's not running for office. He's not trying to make money. He's using his money. He's trying to fix the world. If you say to Bill Gates, I know the last frickin' thing in the world you'd want is a job. I know it's the last thing you want, to be the Secretary of Energy. But while it's the last thing you'd want, you see it, right? You see that if you take this job for 1 year, you change the whole world. You see that, Bill Gates, because he would, right? He would see it. It would give him the power, the leverage, the influence, the platform, the voice. It would give him everything he needs to make a gigantic impact in the future of civilization. Because what we do with nuclear energy is probably one of the biggest factors that will influence civilization for the next 100 years. I think he'd hate it, and I don't know if he could say no, because it would just be too important. By comparison, let me just tell you what he's working on. Bill Gates is working on the hardest, most disgusting, unsexy problem in the world, which is sanitation in Africa. It's a gigantic problem. People are dying from, the diseases they get by their sanitation and their fresh water mingling. And he's fixing that. You watch Bill Gates fix toilets in Africa. You tell me that he wouldn't make a hard choice if he thought the world would be better off for it. There's a man who knows how to make a hard choice, like nobody you've ever met can make a hard choice. He knows how to make a hard choice. So I just put that out there. Trump administration, if you'd like to just shake the box and just make everything different. Bill Gates, 1 year only, head of the Department of Energy. He'd fix everything. All right, that's my suggestion. Don't know how practical it is, but I'd love to see it happen. And for now, that's all. Go have an amazing day. If I can turn this off.